Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. Today we're going to be looking at this hunk of metal, the Massdrop and Ferrum Forge collab on the Buck. This is made by We Knives, like a lot of those Massdrop knives are, but designed by the Ferrum Forge fellas. Let's get into our size comparison. I've got a Spyderco PM2 and a Para 3. This is a pretty decently sized knife. It's not small by any means. And if we take a look here, it's about a 3.5-inch blade from the shoulder, but usable is about just under 3, just a hair. That choil is quite large. Pretty decent sized knife. It is still quite smaller than the PM2, but not by much. Not by much. We do want to do a weigh-in real quick. This is a titanium frame lock flipper, so no internal milling or anything like that, so we're looking at 3.61. That's not too bad. It's a little bit over an ounce an inch, but not that big of a deal, you know, considering you don't have any internal milling and you have like a half backspacer. That's not too bad in all things considered. So let's get into our dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off, in the decent is this blade shape. I really like this blade shape. I think this is the more unique aspect of the knife and something that can really carve itself a name or a kind of a reputation in just being different in somehow. The swedge lines on this are really interesting. I prefer some interesting kind of compound swedge lines than just compound grinds on the actual blade itself. Leave the blade alone, but do your creative fun stuff up here where it's not really gonna affect the sharpening or the cutting of the knife. I think this is a really good idea. Add some heft and weight to the blade without making it crazy on the edge. This is such a high grind that even though the blade stock is relatively thick, it's a really good cutter. And so, knives should cut, and this one definitely does, and it does it with style without going too crazy with compound grinds on the blade, which I do like. The jimping is really good. This is one of my favorite jimpings on a knife. It's right where your thumb wants to land. It's got like that little curve up on the plateau here before it swoops down. You could do some draw cuts, which is comfortable. But man, I like it. It just lands right where it should, and it works whether you're choked up or if you're back here. That's where your thumb pretty much wants to be, and the jimping hangs on. So good job on that. I like that. The tip is very robust. Like I said, it's got a thicker blade stock than usual, and it's not super aggressive to the tip. So I feel like you can be a little bit more rough and tumble with this knife than some without it being like too overbuilt or anything like that. The blade steel is S35EN, and I like that they kept one of the sides free. So this is Massdrop knife. We're accustomed to that being there. We're accustomed to the S35EN. I really don't like this. I don't want to know what the model number is. That's not important to us at all. I also don't like how big it is or how far it goes over. But again, I mean, if you're gonna commit these sins, at least it's relegated to just one side, and you have this side to be nice and clean and it's on the presentation side. So that's good. I like that. Next thing I like is this backspacer. It's got some jimping on there, and it is indeed raised. So as far as like traction of you sticking it in your hand to do either the finger flick out or the flipper tab, I feel like the back of the knife is staying in your palm pretty well. And when you're holding the knife, it's not attacking you. It's right where it's not really touching you that much when you're actually using the knife, so it's not hurting you in any way. But it's pretty classy. I feel like it matches, the gray on the clip and the gray on the black spacer, just kind of ties everything together. It's good. Also, moving on to the lanyard hole. I don't use lanyard holes, but again, this is in a non-offensive place. I don't mind it being here. It's something that doesn't really mess with the profile of the knife too much. Kind of like the Conagarius where they stick the lanyard hole. This is totally fine. I'm okay with this. And then for the action, I want to talk about this opening aperture. So it's got, the Spidey flick, and it is so satisfying to Spidey flick this knife. It's kind of interesting. So it's chamfered in there, which is nice, but the thickness right here, like where the jimping is just so much wider than the part that's underneath. So it has like a little ledge for your finger to kind of grab onto. And so it's really easy, regardless of where you kind of aim in that opening aperture, you're going to get it. It's not going to, be too sharp or too uncomfortable to open the knife. And it's just, the sound of it is good, and the authority that you can do. The detent is pretty strong. So for, such a big blade, in order for it to pop out with authority, that means, to move that much mass that quickly, you're going to have a stronger detent. And so it kind of makes sense why they have such a strong detent on this. It's definitely not too strong, maybe a little bit on the flipper that we'll talk about in a bit. But as far as dialing the detent in for the flick, it's right where it needs to be. I really like that. I appreciate it quite a bit. Next part about the action that I specifically want to call out is the drop shut. So as soon as you get the detent ball onto the tang of the blade, like right there, it just falls. Like it is completely fall shut action. So that is really something special on such, inexpensive knife of just boop, boop. The weight of the blade is obviously the trick here. It's so front heavy that it wants to do the work for you. So it's a little bit more work to open it from the flipper because you're having to whip out that much mass. But for the spider flick, it helps. And for the drop shut, it helps. So overall, I think that's a win for the action as far as that's concerned. And again, action, I'd be surprised if it wasn't good action. All the niceties of a modern titanium frame lock flipper are here. You've got your steel insert, ceramic detent ball, and your over travel stop right there, you can see. So it's not missing any of those amenities. It's all there, done well, and it works. The fit and finish on this knife is top notch. For the centering, we are looking at perfect centering. You have really good seam lines. Can't really find anything wrong with the blade in terms of any kind of fit and finish issues. The cutout on the lock bore is on the inside, which is nice. It's more of a design choice than anything, but it's just really well done. It's sharpened. The grind is even. Didn't really have to mess with anything on cleaning it. I did take the knife apart and lubed it up a little. Didn't really change the action, which means that they did a good job on the first go of it. And so I'm pretty pleased with that. That's good. For the excellence, we have two things to talk about. One is the ergonomics. This is a really comfortable knife, surprisingly so, actually. You would think it's a little bit blocky, but it's just narrow enough that it doesn't really count against it. So saber grip is extremely comfortable. The clip is out of the way, no hot spots. It fills the hand. You've got some room left over if you need it. Everything feels really comfortable. And again, your thumb wants to land right where the jimping is. But you got this giant choil that you can choke up on, and that is equally comfortable. Everything's on the same playing field as far as where this is and where this is. They're all pretty much lined up, and so it fits right in. You can lock into this knife like crazy just with the jimping, and this kind of finger guard thing is just adding to the location and just locking it all into place. Very comfortable to use this knife. You're not talking about micarta handles or something super soft and comfy on it's titanium. It's fine. It's not bad to be in your hand. So it's not like a 10 out of 10, but definitely 9 out of 10 at least on the ergo is enough to put in my excellence. So that's great. I like it. I like the different options to holding the knife and that they're equally comfortable. Last thing, and this is a common thing that is coming up in all these Massdrop knives, but the value is really good. We have the S35EN, which, there's better steels, but this is still a super steel. There's not really anything to complain about, especially for an EDC knife. If you have something very specific that you're looking to do, maybe there's a better steel like LC200N if you're doing a bunch of food prep, that kind of thing. But for general purpose use, this is still very good steel. And at this price, it's really hard to complain. So this is coming in around $120, $140, depending on what kind of finish you get. I think that's an excellent value. It's a full-size knife, excellent action, drop shut, fun to fidget with, multiple ways to open. For $120, this is getting into the same territory of the Keen, where it's just I I can't think of somebody I wouldn't recommend the knife to. And there's enough options as far as like clean, flat, titanium scales or a couple different designs that most people would find one that, kind of speaks to them and they would feel comfortable buying from an aesthetic, standpoint. You're not stuck to just one choice. So all that together, and I think this is just an excellent value. And I'm really, really interested now in what We Knives, Massdrop, and Ferrum Forge are doing. And pretty much they're cranking out these gems, and it's pretty impressive. But it's not without its nitpicks, so we're going to move into the nitpicks. I'm not a huge fan of the machine work. Now, I did not get to buy the one I wanted. I wanted the flat slabs. At the time of purchase, that was not an option. They were sold out of those. But I did want to get my hands on the buck and try it out. And so, personally, the reason I don't like it aesthetically, it's whatever. It kind of looks like a lightsaber, I guess. Modern, close to like looking like a toy. The real reason I don't like it is just gunk gets stuck in there. These are pretty deep machine grooves into the body. And so if you're using it, it's getting pocket time, you got lint or whatever else, food gunk or whatever, it's gonna trap itself in all these lines. And so it's relatively easy to clean it out. You get a Q-tip, it's not gonna be an issue. But if you just have a flat slab of titanium, you're going to avoid that altogether. So I think for me, the flat titanium is cheaper and just, in this case, more practical. So that's the choice I would go with. Not a big deal. Now, on the flipper tab, even though the action is really, really good, I don't like the shape of the flipper tab. It's kind of pointy, and I get why they're doing it, because they designed the flipper tab to match the grip. That if this was flat here, instead of kind of angular, it wouldn't be as symmetrical as far as like the two choils for your fingers to go. So I get why they did it, but as far as actually using the flipper to flip out the knife, the slope down means that you can kind of misfire sometimes, and it's hard to like get your purchase on it. So it takes a little bit more doing. You got to get it like right in the sweet spot, and it is easy, even with the aggressive jimping, to slip off. The jimping is almost worse because it just gouges into your finger or your nail catches it. I chipped my fingernail once on that. Same thing on 2 Massdrop knives. I've done it twice. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I don't know. But I think if this was just a little bit more flat, it'd be easier to just grab that and flip it down. As well as it's kind of sharp in your pocket. Again, I don't tend to put other stuff in that pocket for my knives anyway. Less about the knife destroying what I'm putting in my pocket and more about what I'm putting in my pocket marking up my knives. But regardless, as far as that goes, this is probably one of the worst pocket peckers I've come to, just because it's so sharp and these jimpings are very sharp. And so for being sharp jimping, I'm frustrated that it's still easy to slip off. So it's like the worst of both worlds. Don't really like that. Next is the clip. Now, the clip itself works fine, and it's comfortable in the hand and all that, but I think they chose the wrong place to put it. So you can see they're kind of going with the line, the design line of just going straight down, matching the lock bore line. That's fine as a decision, but we've got this hunk of the knife sitting out, and this would have been relatively deep carry if this was just placed up here and at an angle. So I think they could fix a lot of these issues if they just took this clip and moved it right here, at an angle, and so it's at the tippy top, almost equal to where the lanyard hole is, and that would canter the knife to the side this way, so that pocket pecker isn't so, protruding into the rest of your pocket. So I think that would have solved the actual carrying issues and how deep it is, and maybe a little bit of the negatives of the flipper tab had they done that. Not a big deal. I understand why they put it here, and it might look a little bit aesthetically like, why is it going off at that angle? But once you started to use the knife, you would get why. So, whatever. That could be in the terrible, but it's not like that big of a deal. It's not terrible in the pocket. Just could be better. Moving on to the terrible, I don't really have anything terrible to say about the knife. Again, maybe the aesthetic of this design could be blech to you, but knowing that you can get one with flat titanium slabs kind of removes that as being like a terrible thing that we'd all be stuck with. It's just an option, and it's totally subjective at that. So not a big deal. So with that out of the way, let's move on into the conclusion. The conclusion is this. It's pretty much the same as the dogtooth review that I had. If you like the look of this knife, this is a little bit unique in the blade category. I think this is more practical than the dogtooth in terms of it's not jeopardizing the grind line on the actual blade itself and just doing some fancy stuff up here. This is a really useful, practical blade that's also got the fun fidget factor of a nice opening aperture that flicks out with authority and drop shut action. Those two things, given the steel type and the price, I think that alone makes this a easy recommendation for most people. So, you know, $120, $140, depending on what, you know, configuration you get. Do I recommend this knife? Yes. Yes, I do. It's kind of boring at this point. I kind of want Massdrop to put out a stinker just so I don't sound like I'm a shill for them. But this is good. This is really good. And if you like this, go buy one. I think you'll enjoy it. That's it, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this review and it was helpful to you. I'll see you in the next one. The fit and finish on this knife is really handy. What does that even mean?